Next chapter, Oregon construction laws. A great subject, one we were just looking forward to studying. The Oregon Construction Contractors Board is a 9-member board appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Oregon Senate. This is the Oregon Construction Contractors Board, the actual board of 9 people. Those duties, the key board duties, what's their job? Set construction policy and implement legislation. Oversee the CCB administrator. So you have the board, the 9-member board. They go out and they hire a CCB executive director, and it's their job to oversee that administrator. They also adopt administrative rules, and one of their other functions is to review appeals to proposed orders. You're out there and you're doing work and you run into a problem with a customer and you just can't solve it, and it goes from bad to worse, and the CCB comes in and issues a proposed order for a fine for you, and you feel it is completely unfair. What do? Where do you go? You go to the board and you ask for an appeal of the proposed order. So the board means something to you. Mostly in your day-to-day life, the fact that they can set policy and implement legislation is what affects you the most, because they can do this anytime during the year, and then your life can change depending on what rule they are changing. So that's how they affect us the most. But the way that they assist us is by reviewing appeals to proposed orders. Pay the proposed orders. Don't go to the appeal process unless you're just up against the wall and you have to. It's just a matter of principle, because generally by the time you've gotten that far, you've had opportunity to settle the problem, and now is not the time to get your backup, because you lose your license fast when you don't pay a proposed order from the CCB. Each year, the Oregon Board of Construction Contractors, the CCB, receives up to 1,000 complaints about contractors, many of which are the result of violations of Oregon law. So Oregon construction law, this section, will help you understand some of those regulations, and remember, this is a good source for some additional ones for you to understand. This section helps you understand the regulations for construction contractors that your business must meet to be successful. Here's our outline of this Oregon construction law chapter. Just full of information. They're going to talk about general licensing of contractors and what are independent contractors, the licensing process and licensing endorsements, licenses, and special certificates and bond requirements, insurance requirements and the retention of your contractor's license, renewing a contractor's license and the continuing ed requirements that you have, contracts, notifications and guarantees, resolution of disputes, violations and fines, and possible loss of your legal rights. Let's begin with the general licensing of contractors. The Oregon law requires individuals and businesses who conduct construction activities. And what are construction activities? The building, the altering, the repairing, the moving, the wrecking of any building, any highway, or any improvement attached to any real estate with intent to sell. All those things. Those are construction activities. And Anyone who does those is required to be licensed with the Oregon Construction Contractors Board, the CCB. That's you. That's what we're doing today. Responsible Managing Individual, RMI. The contractor must have at least one person responsible for the business management on record with the CCB at all times. The RMI can be the business owner, or it might be a designated employee. The RMI must have authority, management, or supervision over construction activities. So it is not appropriate to use your accounting person as your RMI. It seems good because they handle all the paperwork and the bookwork. But what you need is somebody who has authority or management or supervision over your construction activities, because they're the ones who need to know the rules and regulations that apply to your jobs. The RMI is the person who completes the training and the exam required. So you are your company's RMI. The licensing process. Oh, this is what you're into now. This is a piece of the licensing process, but there's more for you to do. The contractor's license is valid for 2 years. To obtain a contractor's license, you need to decide on a business entity. What is a business entity? It's Lansing Linoleum Company, Inc., Incorporated, a corporation. We were a C corporation. You might be an LLC, a limited liability company with 1 member or 2 members or 100 members. You might be a sole proprietor. You might be a general partnership. These are called business entities, and you must pick one. You have to appoint your RMI or be your RMI. The RMI then completes this training and passes, which you are going to do, the CCB exam to obtain a license. You register your business with the Oregon Secretary of State's office. You determine the type of structures that you want to work on and the scope of your work. At Lino, we were all about floors. You may want to frame, you may want to do drywall, you may want to build roofs, or maybe you want to build the whole building. Determine the types of structures: residential, commercial, multi-unit housing. What's your avenue? Determine the type of structures on which you will work and the scope of your work, and choose what they call an endorsement. At Lansing Linoleum, residential specialty contractor, because we were floor covering people, not general contractors. Obtain and present a surety bond, a bond, and a liability insurance policy. If you have employees, then you need to get another policy. It's called a workers' compensation insurance policy. If you have employees, get an EIN, that is an employer identification number from the IRS. And if you're going to have employees in Oregon, get a BIN, that's a business identification number from the state of Oregon. Then you download the 18-page application from the CCB and you fill it out. When it's completed, you submit that application for license along with the proof of your bond and in your insurance and all the fees and several other things that you need, like your certificate of passing your test and a copy of your driver's license front and back, now that we're in times when we can't go down to the office in person. And you send it off to the CCB, and then you wait 4 to 6 weeks, and then you will get your CCB number. They mentioned license endorsements, and I mentioned that a few times. What is a license endorsement? Well, a contractor can choose a residential, a commercial, or both a residential and commercial endorsement. The CCB has a list of these endorsements, and they explain to you right on the application what they cover. A residential endorsement allows the contractor to work on residential and small commercial structures. Okay, so what's a small commercial structure? It is a structure not more than 20 feet high with an area of 10,000 square feet or less. Or it could be any size structure if the unit that you're working on is 12,000 square feet or less and not more than 20 feet high, but it's included in a larger commercial building. Or it could be any size structure if your contract is not more than $250,000. So that last phrase is one that is really important for you to remember. The contract is not more than $250,000. That's small commercial. A commercial endorsement allows work on commercial structures. If you want to build 10-story buildings, you definitely that are rented out for offices and house businesses, you need a commercial endorsement. A dual endorsement, too, includes both residential and commercial. And you can get a license that has a dual endorsement. Here's some other types of endorsements. Some licenses, some certifications, all of which the CCB supplies. The CCB also grants special endorsements for those contractors who decide to specialize their operations. Like, they want to become a locksmith. They want to be a home inspector. They want to be a home services contractor or a home energy performance contractor. Home services contractor. That's a contractor who signs a contract with a large general contractor who has just finished a big housing development of 270 houses, and he signs a contract with a home services contractor who will do all the warranty work that he is required to provide over the next several years for that development. What is a home energy performance contractor? A person who comes into the new house or an old house and evaluates the energy performance in the house. They have a clipboard and a pencil. They don't do any construction work, but they do get licensed by the CCB. The CCB also issues special licenses to add to a contractor's license. Okay, so at Lino, we're doing floors. So what we worry about running into asbestos. So we get an asbestos removal certificate for small amounts of asbestos. You might also be a painter who is working in old stock housing before 1978, and guess what's in the paint? Lead-based paint renovation. That can be an important thing for a contractor to have as a special license added to their endorsement. The CCB grants certificates for people who perform certain jobs like lead inspectors and lead assessors. Now they want to tell you about bond requirements. When you get your CCB license, you are required to have both a bond and liability insurance. Licensed contractors, they have to have a surety bond in the amount required for the endorsement of their license. A surety bond, what is it? It is a promise made by a bonding company to make limited payment if a contractor fails to pay a CCB determination, usually based on a court judgment. You're never going to get here. Hopefully you're never going to get there. I never got there once in 35 years where I was ordered by the CCB to pay a determination meaning a fine, and I hadn't paid it. And then what do they do if I didn't pay it? They send it to my bonding agent, and the bonding agent pays it. And then he comes after you. He cuts off your bond. Your license gets revoked. He lets the bonding community know that you're unbondable. Why are you unbondable? Because you broke your word. You said you would do these things and you didn't do them. And you will not get bonded again. This is why we don't want to go to this place. We want to resolve our conflicts well before we get to this place. Here's some examples of the required bond amounts. You can find the required bond amounts for your endorsement right on the CCB application. But here's a couple of examples. For a commercial general contractor level 1, that is the largest commercial general contractor, the bond requirement is $75,000. For a residential general contractor, you must have a $20,000 residential bond. Then they come up with residential limited contractor. Okay, what's a residential limited contractor? This is a handyman designation. You are not to go over $40,000 a year in your little business. And so we only have a bond amount of $10,000 on that small of volume. Now, liability insurance. Okay, we've got our surety bond. Now we need another piece. We need liability insurance. I like to think of liability insurance as responsibility insurance. Liability is like responsibility. Things you must take responsibility for when you are an independent business person. Licensed contractors must maintain liability insurance for the amount required by their endorsement. Again, it says it right on the application. If I'm going to be a commercial contractor level 1, I must have $2 million worth of liability insurance. If I'm going to be a residential general contractor and I'm going to build houses or do major additions or remodel, I need to have $500,000. Now, let me just mention that $500,000, when you go shopping for your liability insurance, is going to turn into $1 million because your insurance agent is going to say $500,000 is not enough liability coverage in the world we live in today. And he will be correct. So you will end up with $1 million worth of liability insurance if you are a residential general contractor, but $500,000 is the CCB requirement. That's the minimum. You could be a residential limited contractor. This is the person who is the handyman services that only does $40,000 a year or less. And the amount of your liability insurance that is required is $100,000. How do you maintain your once we get through all this and we get the CCB number and we're licensed, how do you maintain your contractor's license? To maintain your license for your 2 years that you're licensed, contractors must report the following changes in their business to the CCB. The CCB says If you change your business address, we want to know. If you change your entity, the structure of your business, if you decide, well, I started out as a sole proprietorship, but now I think I want to be an LLC. Or I started out as an LLC, but now I think I want to be an S Corp because my accountant says it's a good idea. They want to know. If you change your endorsements, if you decide to add, I was a residential general contractor, but then I wanted to add an endorsement to be a commercial contractor, they need to know. If you change your official staff, including your RMI, you must file a change of RMI. Inactivation of a license. If you decide that you're going to leave the state of Oregon because think opportunities are not good here. When was that? We had a period where they were not good back in 2008, 2009. Now they're amazing. So who's moving to Montana today? But if you were, because you had a big project out there and you thought you were going to stay for a couple of years and you weren't going to do any business in Oregon and it was time to renew your license, you would renew your license as inactive. Or if you've left the state and you're simply not going to be doing any more business here for the rest of the time that your license is in place here in Oregon, you need to let the CCB know that you want to inactivate your license. How do we renew a contractor's license? A contractor's license is valid for 2 years. To renew an active license, a contractor needs the surety bond and the liability insurance updated and an active RMI. That's you today. You're the RMI, the responsible managing individual, the person who takes the test. They need to have evidence that their continuing education requirement was completed. When you get your CCB license, you will be assigned a range of hours, depending on your experience, maybe 6 to 16 hours, 18 hours for residential, maybe up to 80 hours for commercial. You will be assigned a number of hours that you will need to do in continuing education. Those courses will be offered to you on the CCB website, online, and there are a number of other providers, including the Small Business Development Center. We have a number of classes that would qualify for continuing education for you. So that's something that you want to keep asking about. A valid registry with the Secretary of State. Getting on the list at the Secretary of State when you file your business, they charge you $100 to get on this list that the Secretary of State maintains of all people doing business in the state of Oregon, who they are, where they are. They do nothing else during the year. You won't hear from them, but the next year you will get another bill. So you do need to pay it so that you can have a valid registry with the Secretary of State. If the contractor has employees, you've got to have valid employer account numbers. That would be the BIN number. That's a business identification number from the state of Oregon. And you also would want your policy number for your workers' compensation policy if you have employees. Continuing education requirements. Unless they are exempt, that means they don't have to do it for some reason, which you do have to do it. Generally, you'd have to. All contractors must complete the required continuing education during each license period of 2 years. Here's some examples of the required hours, which I just bungled earlier, okay? Commercial contractors, 16 to 80 hours, and residential contractors, 8 to 16 hours. Again, These will be assigned to you when you get your CCB license. Okay, let's talk about written contracts. You are about to embark on writing legal contracts. A written contract is required for residential projects over $2,000. Over $2,000. $2,005, $2,001, $2,025. Over $2,000, not $2,000. Over $2,000. The state of Oregon is asking you to write a written contract. This can be a simple contract. It can look like a proposal or an estimate. It could have all the information on it that's necessary, and it could serve as a legal contract. When you give out contracts, written contracts, for projects more than $2,000, you are also required to give 3 notices to your customer. When we initially saw these notices, the information notice to owner about construction liens, the consumer protection notice, and the notice of procedure. When we originally saw them, 30 years ago, and started to give them out, our customers really got upset. As soon as we handed them the information notice to owner about construction liens, they started calling and saying, "Kathleen, what are you doing? Are you putting a lien on our property?" What is a lien? A lien is a claim against real property in the state of Oregon. This is a very specific law that we have that we'll talk more about later. A construction lien. We have to give a notice to our customers. Please read this notice when you get the opportunity. You literally can Google it, information notice to owner about construction liens, and you can learn about the construction lien law too. It's not your job to explain the construction liens law to anyone. It is your job to deliver the notices at the time that you sign your contracts. So we have the information notice to owner about construction liens. We have the consumer protection notice, letting them know about the fact that they can withdraw from the contract during a certain amount, the 3-day rule. There's a number of things in there about their protection. And then we have the notice of procedure, and the notice of procedure tells them how they can file a complaint against us, against their contractor. You might want to take a good look at all 3 of these notices, but again, when your customers have questions about the notices, there are phone numbers on them for them to call to have this explained to them. These notices must be provided no later than the contract date. For new residential construction, 0 lot line dwellings, and remodels over $50,000 with intent to sell, these notices and warranties are required. Okay, now let's switch. We've got a residential project, $2,050, and we have these 3 notices to give out. Now we're going to build a whole house, a residential house, or a 0 lot line dwelling, or a remodel over $50,000 with intent to sell. Now we're into 3 different notices. The notice of compliance with the Home Buyer Protection Act, the residential warranty, and the maintenance schedule. So we have some more notices that have to appear if we do new residences, 0 lot line dwellings, and remodels of $50,000 or more with intent to sell. Here are the required commercial warranties if you are going to build commercial structures. For a new large commercial structure, the contractor must provide a 2-year warranty against defects in materials and workmanship that covers the building envelope and the penetration components, and they have to provide annual inspections. Okay, there's a few things in this paragraph you haven't heard from me yet. One of them is, what is the building envelope? The building envelope refers to the exterior shell of the building. That includes the roof. It includes the exterior walls, the windows, the doors, the balconies, the decks, the foundation, and the crawl spaces. So this is the building envelope. And then they want to cover penetration components. Anywhere where the roof is penetrated by a chimney, by any window, vents, all those things are called penetration components. And you need to provide annual inspections for 2 years. Okay, moving on to another area of construction law. They want to talk to you about dispute resolution. The CCB processes complaints against contractors and subcontractors with licenses. Owners, general contractors, subcontractors, employees, and suppliers of materials and machinery may file complaints with the CCB about each other. If the complaint involves a residential contractor, which many of us will be, the CCB will attempt to mediate the complaint. Okay, your customer calls up the CCB and complains about you, and they send out a representative from the CCB to try to help settle the complaint. If or when the mediation is not successful, doesn't work, we still can't agree. And for all other complaints against commercial contractors, the plaintiff, that's the person who's complaining, must first go to a court or start an arbitration. Arbitration, that's another word we have not run across yet. What is an arbitration? An arbitration is a form of settling difficulties, settling problems, where if you and I are having a disagreement and we agree that we cannot solve it by ourselves, we hire and go in to see a professional arbitrator. This person is not a judge. They could be a retired judge. They might be a retired attorney. We sign up, we agree beforehand that when we go in there and tell our side of the tale to the arbitrator, when the arbitrator makes a decision, then that will be the end of it. It will be legally binding on both of us. So an arbitration is a way to settle a disagreement without having to go to court. So you can either go to court or you can start an arbitration, and then you have to get a judgment either from the court or the arbitrator. Then you can turn around and file your complaint with the CCB. The contractor's surety bond can be used to pay the damages. Okay, that surety bond that you have to buy, that $20,000 bond if you're a residential, and if you're the biggest commercial, you have to have a $75,000 bond. That surety bond, at the point where you have failed to pay a proposed order from the CCB and you have not paid it and you've had 30 days and you didn't pay it, they can turn around and send the bill to your bonding agent, and he will pay the damages. He or she. Payment of determinations of the CCB. Determinations, or proposed orders, they're sometimes called. When the CCB decides that a licensed contractor owes money based on a court decision, the contractor must make arrangements to pay the amount determined by the CCB within 30 days. If the contractor does not pay, the CCB sends the determination to the surety bond company for payment. If the surety bond isn't enough to pay the debt, the CCB will then suspend the contractor's license until it pays the balance owed. After this, any part that's not paid can be filed as a lien. Remember, a lien is a claim against real property. So say I'm a contractor and I own my house, I own something, or maybe I'm a contractor and I own my business building. Any part that wasn't paid, that I was told to pay by the CCB and the courts, could be filed as a lien against some of my property. Here's our deadlines for filing complaints. Okay, this whole complaint process, you will get involved with it eventually. It's written up in this book and it's on the CCB website. So if you get into these, you're going to want to study the deadlines. Owner complaints. Okay, we said there were a lot of people who could file complaints with the CCB, a lot of different types of people. One of those types is the owner of the property. So I'm a Mrs. Homeowner, and I have a residential home, and I want to file a complaint. If it's a new home, I have to file within 1 year from the date the structure was first occupied, or within 2 years of substantial completion of the house, whichever is first. If I'm living in an existing structure and I have some work done and I have a complaint to file against my contractor, I need to file within 1 year from the date the work was substantially completed. If it's an incomplete project, if my contractor walked off the job or a subcontractor walked off the job, I have to file within 1 year from the date that the contractor ceased to work on the project, stopped working. Now they want to talk about general contractor complaints. We were talking about owner complaints, people who own the property. Now we're going to move over to the prime or general. Prime and general are interchangeable. These kind of contractor complaints. In a new structure, the general contractor has to file within 14 months from the date the structure was first occupied, or 2 years after substantial completion, whichever comes first. It's got 14 months from the date the structure was first occupied. On an existing structure, one where we've just done a substantial remodel, I'm the general contractor. I have a problem with a subcontractor or some other kind of problem with a material supplier, or any problem I have and I want to file with the CCB. I have 14 months from the date the subcontractor substantially completed the work. In the case of an incomplete project where the project completely fell apart, I need to file complaints within 14 months from the date the subcontractor ceased work. In this case, I am the general contractor. I am looking to file a complaint with the CCB against a subcontractor who walked off the project. Employees of general or the subcontractor may file a complaint within 1 year from when wages were earned. So if I'm employed by a general contractor or I am employed by a subcontractor and I did not get paid, I need to file within 1 year from when those wages were earned. Equipment or material suppliers also have a right to file a lien or make a complaint with the CCB. In this case, they can complain to the CCB as well. Equipment or material suppliers or a licensed subcontractor. Any of those three need to file within 1 year from the date the materials were sold or the work was performed. So they have 1 year. These are complaints to the CCB. The process for starting complaints against contractors. A pre-complaint notice and a fee. The plaintiff, that's the person who's complaining, must send a pre-complaint notice at least 30 days before filing. The CCB charges $50 for a residential complaint, but there is no charge for commercial. For complaints against residential contractors, the plaintiff submits these documents to the CCB: a complaint form, a copy of the pre-complaint notice and post office receipt proving that it has been sent 30 days in advance, plus copies of contracts, change orders, invoices, or other documents that prove that a contract existed. Complaints against commercial contractors. Complaints must originate in court or in arbitration and receive a judgment before submitting the complaint to the CCB. Now, complaints against contractors with dual endorsements that hold both a residential and commercial license. You file with the CCB if you worked on a residential property. You start in court or arbitration if you worked on large commercial project. And you get to file either way if it's a small commercial project. Now, violations and penalties. The CCB issues sanctions or penalties against contractors, licensed or unlicensed, who do not comply with the laws. The most common violations are to work, to offer to work, or advertise when you do not have a license. You can get a fine of up to $5,000. You work with a contractor that is not licensed. You fail to display your contractor's license number as required. You can get immediate license suspension by failing to maintain a surety bond and liability insurance, hiring employees when you said you were exempt. In other words, you declared that you had no employees, but now you've hired one without letting the CCB know, and failing to pay your construction debts as ordered by the CCB. Enforcing the construction law. The CCB works with the State Department of Justice, that's the DOJ, the district attorneys, the law enforcement, and other state agencies to investigate and prosecute illegal activities in the construction sector. Common kinds of contractor penalties: up to a $5,000 fine, revoking and suspending your license, increasing your bond amount, and if you made enough mistakes over and over again, they might even bar you from bidding on any public works, or certainly from doing any of them. You might also suffer a loss of legal rights. Contractors who do not maintain a license for the entire duration of a project may lose their legal rights to recover damages in a court, or their right to complaint to the CCB, or to file a construction lien.